Welcome to my art studio where all the magic happens. This is the station for painting, and that is the station for all the resin art I do. If you want to check out my art, all you gotta do is go to lutfstudio.com. Finish this painting, but I'm sure, or at least I hope, I'll see you at lutfstudio.com. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Live Up to Freedom. Thank you so much for joining me today, wherever you're joining me. We are live on Lindell TV, frankispeech.com, YouTube, Facebook, and I am trying Twitter today, so we'll see. As always, please feel free to use the comment section of whichever platform you're on. I will grab your comments and questions. However, to address the issue I wanted to address today, which is the border crisis that you are all aware of, I wanted to have my very dear friend who's an expert on border crisis, immigration, and illegal immigrants on the show. But because of difficulty and conflict of a schedule, we had to pre-record the interview with him. So we're going to go to the pre-recorded interview with Michael Cutler. Some of you might be familiar with him. He is not a new guest or first timer on my show. He is a retired or former INS agent who has spent 30 years of his life in United States of America Immigration and Naturalization Services, with a lot of experience and information in the history of what we have faced from back in the time until today. And he has agreed graciously that anyone with any questions in the comment sections for me to capture those, and he will be back Sunday for our Let's Be Frank program to answer all those questions. And thankfully Sunday he can join us actually live to address more questions as we go through the questions from today. So use the comment sections for your questions if you have any. Without further ado, let's go ahead and hear the thoughts of Michael Cutler, former INS agent of United States of America. I will come and join you before we wrap up today's show. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us today, even though you have a very, very complicated and busy schedule.
My pleasure, and I so appreciate what you're doing. It's a pleasure and privilege to join you today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Last time I had you on my program, it was amazing how much information you were providing and how much my audience was definitely curious as to knowing more and understanding more. So I'm glad we were able to bring you back. But today, specifically, I wanted to talk to you because I saw this video. I think it was on Laura Ingram's show on Fox News or something, talking about what is happening inside New York, far away from the border, inside New York, with illegal immigrants literally just doing whatever they want, wasting food, wasting water, doing drugs,
crashing
committing
hotel
crimes.
rooms. Yes, crashing hotel rooms, $500 a night hotel rooms.
Exactly. So it got me thinking that on my end, I've been telling on my audience and my fellow Americans that, guys, first of all, there is no border crisis because crisis applies to a person, object, subject, or a location. We don't have a border, therefore there is no border crisis. We have border disaster. And it doesn't end at the border because they cross the border. From there, they spread across the country. Now, I normally emphasize on the IRGC, Hamas, Taliban, ISIS, Islamic illegals who cross border and come in, stand by for their orders. But watching this video, I thought about, I'm like, oh, wow. From A to Z of whomever is not, I'm not saying 100%, Michael, but I would say 70% of these people who are illegally coming into the country, at least to our understanding illegally, they're not here in any shape or form to assimilate. They're not here to build a life. They're not here to be American.
No. Well,
as a former immigration officer, you've seen it. I would say you've seen it all because you have given so many testimony with facts and evidence. So where are we at the moment? Where are we at with our border, Michael?
Well, we're at the precipice of oblivion. But here's the point that everyone keeps missing. A long time ago, I said that the United States had 50 border states. I do a lot of public speaking events besides having been before Congress and state legislative hearings, TV appearances, and so forth. I've been trying to get the word out ever since 9/11. I'm a New Yorker. And on September 11, 2001, the ashes landed on my home. And what was so frustrating to me was I had had an argument with the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee before 9/11. I said, what the blank will it take? Another attack at the Trade Center? We had the argument on the Friday before 9/11. Okay? Because we have had this catastrophe ongoing for decades. This didn't happen just now. It's not just Joe Biden. What Joe Biden has done is outrageous. I would argue you could almost call it treasonous. He took an oath of office that included to defend the Constitution. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution says that the states are to be provided with a Republican form of government and protected against invasion and domestic violence. If this doesn't constitute an invasion, I want someone to get me a new dictionary. Okay? But this has been ongoing. Jimmy Carter started the nonsense with Orwellian newspeak saying we can't use the word alien. The word alien is a legal term. The Immigration and Nationality Act defines an alien as any person who is not a citizen or national of the United States. There's no insult. It's not the N word. It doesn't say that they're stupid or immoral or God knows what. All it says is you're not a citizen. That makes you an alien. It's a term used by countries around the world. It's recognized in international law. Alien is a person, not a citizen. The idea was to change perception through the change of language straight out of the pages of George Orwell. If you want to know what's going on, read Orwell. Very clear. This is about altering perceptions through altering language. We think with words. When you change the words, it alters thought patterns. Okay? Along comes Ronald Reagan after that. By the way, Jimmy Carter ordered immigration agents not make arrests during the census that was conducted on his watch. Why? They wanted to gerrymander congressional districts, get more seats in the House, and ultimately more votes in the Electoral College, because it was the cities that were the Democrat strongholds that had the greatest number of illegal aliens. So they were determined to get the illegal aliens counted for the census, again, for the purposes of gerrymandering. It was interesting that Donald Trump tried to change the census to the point that illegal aliens shouldn't be counted, but the courts overruled him. But I agree with him, because the way you apportion representation in the House of Representatives and in the Electoral College constitutes political representation. So we are giving political representation to illegal aliens, beyond the fact that no doubt there are aliens who do vote. There have been cases of aliens voting, much as the politicians might want to deny it. I don't know how widespread it is, but I do know there had been open cases when I was an agent of people voting who weren't supposed to vote. But they're getting political representation simply by being counted in the census. That's a point that almost nobody makes. Now, full disclosure, I'm a lifelong registered Democrat. But the Democrats are no longer Democrats, and the Republicans have always been open borders advocates. I want you to think about that.
Let's okay, hold on. Let me stop you right there, because I'm aware that you're a registered Democrat, and for my life in America, I was a registered Republican. Now I'm a registered independent. But the reason I want to stop you is majority of people, those who know or who don't, will tell you that this open border idea has started with Democrats. It's promoted by Democrats, yada, 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 yada. Now, I personally walked away from my party because I'm done with both parties. At this point, it's Americans versus whatever. I'm done with parties, but do tell my audience, for anyone who might be on a screen right now thinking, what? You're accusing? Tell my audience, where is the evidence? Where is the historical fact of Republicans being always open border promoters or pro-open borders?
Well, we've always heard the glib nonsense. People use phrases, and it's very, very frustrating when you resort to phrases, slogans. That's the tactic of totalitarian regimes. We're going to use an all-encompassing phrase, and somehow that's going to tell everybody everything they need. So I just want to say something before I do that. George Washington hated political parties, talking about the party. So I want to quote George Washington. This is what he said during his farewell address when he was leaving office. However, political parties may now and then answer popular ends. They are likely, in the course of time and things, to become potent engines by which cunning, ambitious, and unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people, to usurp for themselves the reins of government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. Just think about that. And there was a time that if I said anything negative about Ronald Reagan, the conservatives wanted to have me tarred, feathered, lynched. Oh my God, how could you say that about Ronnie? So let me tell you an insider's view, because I was with the INS beginning in 1971. My career with the Immigration Service spanned 30 years. My involvement with politics goes back to around 1980 when I approached then New York Senator Al D'Amato with the proposition that they change the reentry law to make unlawful reentry by criminal aliens a 20-year maximum felony. Up until then, there was no distinction about criminal history. Any alien who was deported and came back was looking at 2 years in jail, period. Because the penalty was so slight or small, the U.S. attorneys never wanted to prosecute the cases. Why bother? 2 years? Well, we got the law changed. Under Trump, that was the most frequently prosecuted felony for the entire Justice Department. And not just from Latin America. You know, when Trump came out and said there's a lot of bad hombres out there, I cringed. As an immigration agent, I've arrested criminals, terrorists, people from all over the world, from Europe, from Latin America, from Asia. I got an award from the government of Japan. If you look over my shoulder, that one of the two certificates is from the Japanese government for helping them with a drug case where one of their citizens was smuggling cocaine from the United States into Tokyo. The other certificate, by the way, is from Jeff Sessions, because he quoted me from the floor of the Senate during the floor debate about comprehensive immigration reform, wherein I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Times and referred to comprehensive reform as the Terrorist Assistance and Facilitation Act, giving millions of people lawful status without so much as an interview, let alone a field investigation. But to get back to Ronald Reagan, when Reagan was the president, one of the first things he did was to launch the visa waiver pilot program so that aliens could come to America without requiring a visa. A visa is an important measure of security. In fact, I testified, believe it or not, for all people, Sheila Jackson Lee twice. 6 months after 9/11, Sheila had me testify about how two dead terrorists, including the ringleader, Mohammed Atta, the other guy was Marwan al-Shei, they were in the cockpits of the two planes that slammed into the World Trade Center towers. They were granted authorization to attend flight school, believe it or not, 6 months to the day after 9/11. So by then, the whole world knew they were dead and knew they were terrorists. But this was typical of the INS. It was an incompetent, inept agency that always refused to take itself seriously. Okay? Ronald Reagan gave us the visa waiver program. Now, when I testified for Sheila Jackson Lee at the second hearing, it was about visa fraud. And I said that when we put up a fence around a building, we don't lean the fence against the wall of the building. We move it out to the furthest extremity of the property upon which that building is constructed. It only makes sense, right? So you put the fence at the extremity, and then you've got that space between the fence and the building. And then we secure the building. We put locks on the doors and alarms on the windows, and maybe put a safe in the middle of the house where you keep your most valuable of possessions. It's done in layers. So the first layer of security, in essence, that fence, is moved out to the embassies and consulates where the visa is issued. In fact, visa fraud is a felony. For all the lies and nonsense we're hearing from the open borders advocates in politics and the media, oh, immigration law violations are like jaywalking, it's civil law. No, it's not just civil law. There's two sets of laws, and this is something I want everyone to understand. Criminally, if you lie on an application for a visa, if you lie on an application for citizenship, you're committing a felony. It's a serious crime. And in fact, if you get a visa by committing fraud, that felony calls for up to 25 years in jail. Don't tell me that's civil law. Don't equate that with jaywalking, okay? Reentry after deportation, because of what we did, is 20 years in a federal penitentiary as a maximum punishment. That's not an administrative violation. Administrative violations mean we deport the alien. We strip that alien of whatever status they acquired. Perhaps we impose a small fine. But the focus of administrative immigration law is the removal of the alien from the United States. But there's a body of criminal law that calls for decades in jail. But to minimize how people perceive him, oh, it's a minor, it's jaywalking, right? You ran a stop sign. This isn't a big deal. No harm, no fat. No, it's a big deal because as the 9/11 Commission staff report on terrorist travel pointed out, let me read the first paragraph of the preface to that report that was authored by the agents and attorneys who worked for the 9/11 Commission. It is perhaps obvious to state that terrorists cannot plan and carry out attacks in the United States if they are unable to enter the country. Yet prior to September 11, while there were efforts to enhance border security, no agency of the U.S. government thought of border security as a tool in the counterterrorism arsenal. Indeed, even after 19 hijackers demonstrated the relative ease of obtaining a U.S. visa. See, they're not saying the Mexican border here. Obtaining a U.S. visa and gaining admission into the United States, border security still is not considered a cornerstone of national security policy. What kind of imbeciles do we have running the agencies, right? You can't figure it out that you've got to protect your borders wherever they might be, and there's borders in all 50 states. And it goes on and finally says, we believe for reasons that we discuss in the following pages that is to say border security must be made one. So what is happening, it violates the findings and recommendations of the 9/11 Commission. So Ronald Reagan gave us the visa waiver program, took down that layer of security. Why? The Chamber of Commerce, the United States Chamber of Commerce, does not see our borders as the first and last line of defense of our country and our citizens. They see it as an impediment to their wealth. I've been told that by people affiliated with the Chamber of Commerce. Okay? Let's be clear. Okay. Now,
let me interrupt you for 1 second before we go any further. Ronald Reagan, by the way, you mentioned something about if you say bad things. I recently, a few months ago, was giving a speech at Brian House's annual Lake of Ozark event, and I actually started because the room was filled with conservative Christians, and I said, I'm about to offend some of you, but that's okay because that's my God-given right, because I was about to break the news that Ronald Reagan also is the very first president of the United States of America who officially legitimized the regime in Iran and is the first president who made arms deal with Iran, the mullahs.
Yeah, the Iran-Contra deal. That was why I didn't vote for him after that.
So even though Ronald Reagan, I still say a lot of time people are like, oh, we need a Ronald Reagan now. I'm like, no, we don't. We need a Lincoln. We don't need a Ronald Reagan. We need a Lincoln.
I couldn't agree with you more. But so just to get to the point. So he gave us the visa waiver program. He gave us this massive amnesty that was supposed to involve about 1 million illegal aliens. The argument was patently ridiculous, and we're hearing it all over again. Well, we can't arrest all these people, so we may as well legal. What does that mean? You know how many people have said to me, if you can't deport 11 million, what do you do with them?
You deport them.
You know, well, so here's the point. You know, I always joke that, you know, I'm a Jewish kid from Brooklyn. Jews answer questions with another question. So my question in response to that is, what do the cops do with the drunk drivers they don't find, or the speeders or reckless drivers they don't find? You arrest as many as you can, you make them suffer severe consequences under the law, and you publicize what you're doing as a deterrence. So Ronald Reagan said, oh, we're going to reset the clock to zero. We're going to legalize these people. And if they've been here for X number of years, now, no one bothered to ask, how do you figure out how long an illegal alien has been living in the United States? When aliens run the border, they do not create a record of entry. There is no way of interviewing millions of people. There is no way, certainly, of conducting field investigations. I've done field investigations when we look to suspend deportation for an alien who's been here a certain period of time, has American family, and so forth. But it means going out, knocking on doors, showing photographs, interviewing witnesses. It usually takes close to a week per case. If we try to legalize millions of people, who's going to do the interviews and knocking on doors? It's not happening, folks. What's going to happen is the aliens will tell you when they got here, and the adjudicator, and I spent a year as an adjudicator doing the marriage interview. So when I speak about this stuff, it's not hypothetical like the talking heads on TV. I began my career with the INS as an immigration inspector at Kennedy Airport. I was there for 4 years. For one of the 4 years, I was assigned to act as an adjudicator doing the interviews. Then I became a special agent, and I rotated through all the squads within the investigations branch in New York City. I ultimately became the first immigration agent assigned to the Unified Intelligence Division of DEA in 1988. And then I was promoted to the position of senior special agent and assigned to the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, where I had desks with the FBI, DEA, ATF. I worked with local and state police and foreign governments. So when I speak about this, I just want you to know I'm speaking from firsthand personal front row experience, something I did for 30 years.
That's exactly why we love having you here. But hold on, before we move, I want to go back to Reagan. Two questions. One, this visa waiver by Reagan, was this something that went through the Congress and Senate and passed, or was this something Reagan did as executive order?
You know what? I don't recall, but I do remember that we were very upset with it.
Okay, so because the reason I'm asking this, Michael, is my question comes here. Reagan did it. Okay, two scenarios, either passed through Senate and floor, or it was an executive order. Now, the next president coming into power, why did they carry it on and on and on and on to today? That's carrying,
very
you know
easy.
What I mean?
And they kept expanding it,
Every and this is where I want to make the tie that we need to stop the party talk. Reagan might have started it, but the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one, between the Republican and Democrats, they kept sharpening it into a bigger weapon against Americans.
Well, but now, but so, and I don't want to interrupt you, but I don't want to lose the train of thought. They changed the penalty for visa fraud after 9/11, making it a 25-year felony if the fraud was committed in conjunction with terrorism. And at the same time, they kept expanding the number of countries in the visa waiver program, which meant that those aliens could not be prosecuted because there was no visa requirement for them. Mm-hmm. What are we doing? On the one hand, we're going to be tough. On the other hand, we're opening up the doors. Why? Because the Chamber of Commerce, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, various religious groups, all these people feeding at the trough because what they wanted, and when they say they want cheap labor, no, they want to destroy the wages for American workers. That's what cheap labor means. Alan Greenspan testified for Chuck Schumer back on April 30th, 2009, said the solution to wage inequality, and he called the American high-tech workers with advanced degrees the privileged elite, and said they're making much too much money. We could take care of that if we stop shielding American workers from foreign competition. Well, guess what? The immigration laws do precisely that. Under FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, during the Depression, he said, look, we're going to make sure that Americans never compete with foreign workers because they will displace Americans. They will settle for worse wages and worse working conditions, and labor is a commodity. If you flood the labor pool with workers, the value of labor decreases. So we will enforce the law to protect the jobs and wages of Americans, which is why I registered as a Democrat. My dad, may rest in peace, was a tradesman. And to me, tradesmen rock. Without them, we'd be living in caves. My mom came here ahead of the Holocaust as a 13-year-old legally. And it was the Democrat Party that sought to protect the wages and jobs of Americans. That was the Labor Party, so-called, okay? And I agreed with their goals. And the other party, the Republicans, were all about the business owners, and both sides of the aisle have reasonable claims and concerns. But what the Democrats have subsequently done is pulled back and said, the hell with the American worker, and that's when the wheels came off the wagon. But we're not done with Reagan yet, because Reagan also gave us the diversity visa, the visa lottery. He started the ball rolling, and guess what? George Herbert Walker Bush signed it into law. Now, Reagan did something else with the amnesty program. This was never done before with anything, because people say to me, oh, Kennedy convinced him to do it, Ted Kennedy. Well, you know what? The amnesty provisions in the file, the amnesty portions of the file that belongs to an alien, were sacrosanct. If an alien came in legally, got U.S. citizenship, the FBI would come to me and say, Mike, we're working on this case. Can you help us? We need to see the immigration file. A homicide detective from the NYPD, we need to see the file. They could get that file under Freedom of Information. We would put a notice in the file that the file had been reviewed by whatever law enforcement agency. The amnesty files, thanks to Mr. Reagan, we would be committing a 5-year felony, I believe it was, if I so much as showed a photograph from that file to an FBI agent, even if the guy had killed 500 people and was running around with an atom bomb. They would have to go to the court and get a court order from a federal judge before we could show them anything in an amnesty file. They were treated as though they were above everything else. This was an open invitation to immigration fraud. You should know that the first time I testified before Congress was 4.5 years before 9/11. The focus of the hearing was immigration fraud and visa fraud because of the attacks in 1993 at the CIA by a Pakistani by the name of Kansi, who shot up the CIA. And a month later, we had the bombing at the Trade Center. Every single alien committed multiple frauds against the immigration system. And now we're flooding that very same system with all these supposed political refugees, and people don't even understand what political asylum means. And I've heard this from journalists. Oh, the conditions in their country is so terrible. That's not asylum, okay? Oh, they're living in poverty and the gangs are terrible. That's not asylum. Asylum is very specific and very narrow. In order to qualify for political asylum, an alien has to demonstrate a credible fear, which means subject to investigation, that he or she would suffer persecution or worse because of their race, their religion, their ethnicity, their tribal affiliation, their political beliefs, or their sexual orientation. That's it. The fact that the crime rate is almost as bad as Chicago doesn't qualify, okay? Living in poverty doesn't mean you can come here and say asylum.
Oh, and let's not forget that at 70% of these bad conditions, get ready everyone to be triggered. Trigger warning, trigger warning, trigger warning. 70% of these bad conditions is because of America. Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Ukraine. Come on. We are creating the crisis in their country so we can import them into our country.
Well, it's that. It's the cheap labor. It's resources. We do a lot of things in the name of big business. So I'm at the point where my belief is that I do not believe in America first. Now, before you guys get all excited and have a meltdown, I believe in Americans first, we the people. America first are these corporations that are flooding America with foreign workers, and it's both parties. I had an argument with Bob Goodlatte, who was the Republican chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, over that statement by Alan Greenspan calling American high-tech workers the privileged elite, who said, we need to make those Americans compete with foreign workers. And once we do that and we drive down their wages, then we greatly reduce wage inequality between Americans with skills and those with lesser skills. What he was saying is, let's have communism. So if you drop out of high school or you have a PhD in chemistry, either way, you'll earn pretty much the same paycheck. Okay? And the problem with communism, and the biggest problem with academia is two words. They always say in theory, right? In theory. But the problem is the real world in reality runs in opposition to the theory. I'll give you an example. If you think communism makes sense, my dog is a capitalist. You want to train a dog, you got to reward them. You want Americans to excel, they have to get a reward for making the effort. Why would you bother going to college and paying a fortune in tuition and studying your tail off and put off working for years as you acquire your degree if you could simply take a civil service job fresh out of high school and start working when you're 18 and be paying into a pension fund while your brother or sister is sweating it out in a university and doesn't get a paying job for 5, 6, 7 years as they train to qualify for the career of their choice. So we're destroying our own. I remember when Sputnik was launched, Eisenhower said, we're going to make sure the American kids get the best education in math and science. Nope. And now what do we hear from the politicians like Ted Cruz? For Americans to succeed, Americans need to bring in the best and brightest. I almost had a fight with Ted physically when I said to him, I'm from Brooklyn, and where I come from, we have a term for the world's best and brightest. We call them Americans. But anyway, I think we've wrapped up with Reagan. I also want to talk about Jimmy.
Hold on 1 second, Michael. We are out of time with the Lindell TV audience, so we're gonna say bye to our Lindell TV audience. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to hear the rest of this interview and this program, hop on over to my YouTube or Facebook channel because we're gonna continue. But we will take a 1 minute sponsor break. Hear from Mike Lindell, and then we're going to come back and continue this discussion. Rest of the platforms, don't go anywhere. Lindell TV audience, as always, stay safe, stay vigilant. God bless you, and God bless America.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell. Years ago, when I invented MyPillow, I was faced with every adversity you could think of. No retailers wanted to sell MyPillow. That's come full circle. Vendors took advantage of me, and I was copied by China. Well, by the grace of God, I was able to get through all that and learn from it. I have a passion to help other U.S. entrepreneurs, and that's why I created my new platform, MyStore.com. We have hundreds of products from amazing entrepreneurs, and to celebrate, I'm going to put my pillows on MyStore.com right now. You can get my standard My Pillows regularly $69.98, now only $19.98 with your promo code. Or you can get my standard queen size, regular $79.98, now only $29.98. Or you can get my premium king size, regularly $89.98, now only $34.98. So go to mystore.com and use that promo code on your screen to get huge discounts on all my store products. Thank you and God bless.
Welcome back to Live Up to Freedom. Thank you so much for staying with us. So, Michael, we were wrapping up with Reagan, and it was time to move on to you.
The Clinton gave us the H-1B visa program and also gave us the motor voter law.
Wait,
okay?
that was Clinton's?
Yep.
Wow, I had no clue. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, and when Clinton came in, they brought in Doris Meisner, and they implemented a program called Citizenship USA, or CUSA, where the goal was to naturalize as many new citizens as possible. And it had been, up until then, a sacrosanct process. You're supposed to go out, agents were supposed to go out and do field investigations into people who apply for citizenship to make certain they had good moral character. So what does that mean? Let's say, for argument's sake, Charlie Smith from Great Britain comes to the United States. He says, I'm going to become an American. He's been living here for 5 years. He meets all the requirements. He doesn't have any arrests for serious crimes, has no convictions. But an agent goes out and starts knocking on neighbors' doors. Do you know this guy, Charlie? Oh, yeah, he's not bad when he's sober, but Friday night when he gets paid, he goes to the bar, he hangs out with the hookers. When his wife complains one month, 3 months ago, he took his son's cat and threw it out the window. The poor animal was crippled because of that. He beats his wife. She won't go to the police. If you had 3, 4, 5 neighbors telling you stories like that about Charlie, guess what? We wouldn't give him citizenship. Why? That's not good moral character. Hanging out with hookers, gambling in an illegal gambling joint, beating up his wife, destroying the cat's paws, whatever. That's not good moral character. We were very select.
Wait, are you telling me there was a time when in the United States of America you actually had to follow certain guidelines in order to become a citizen?
Imagine?
Wow, what a concept.
Could you imagine? And so they were, and the only people who were allowed to handle those applications were attorneys who had worked for the Immigration Service for decades. It was like a bunch of the elderly, and these were brilliant lawyers, because sometimes legal issues arose about whether or not to naturalize people, okay? All of a sudden, guess what happens? Meisner comes in as commissioner, Clinton is there, and they push over 1.1 million applications for citizenship through the system faster than you-know-what goes through a goose. And then there were complaints by the government workers at INS that, hey, what we're doing is violating the law. We've naturalized criminals. And it turned out that we did. So this was what happened to Citizenship USA. They didn't even wait for the fingerprints to come back. Forget about field investigations.
Wow.
Right? So they streamlined that. We had 9/11. George W. Bush, when he created the Department of Homeland Security, violated the enabling legislation, the Homeland Security Act. How did he violate it? Well, the Homeland Security Act, and John Hostetler, who was a Republican and the chairman of the Immigration Subcommittee, and I testified for John a whole bunch of times. Altogether, I believe I testified before 16 or 17 hearings in the House and Senate. And mostly I was called by the Republicans, although Jackson Lee did call me for 2 hearings, and I worked closely with the Democrats also after 9/11, because everyone wanted America to be protected.
Jackson Lee. When did she go?
Sheila Jackson Lee.
I know, Sheila Jackson. When did she start going off the rail? Like, I remember there was a time she was really, even though she was Democrat, she was very logical. But then it's like last couple of years, Sheila Jackson Lee is just concentrating on all irrelevant, like, the recent anti-white supremacy bill. I'm like, what is she doing?
But it's not just her. Bernie Sanders in 2006 stood shoulder to shoulder with the AFL-CIO and said that anybody who hires illegal aliens should be prosecuted because you're destroying jobs and wages for Americans. Bernie Sanders. You heard the same thing from Harry Reid. You heard the same thing from the Clintons. And I will tell you what happened. The Supreme Court decided Citizens United, which stated that unlimited amounts of money could be pumped into political campaigns. And the climate changed overnight. I was invited up until then, perhaps 20 to 30 times per month to be on major TV shows. Fox News. I was on the Today Show. ABC News. MSNBC had me on more frequently than anybody. CNN, I was a regular with Lou Dobbs when he was at CNN, sometimes being on 2 or 3 times in a week. And when Citizens United was decided, everything shut down. Everything shut down. My joke is they need a new cabinet level position in the government, that of auctioneer. Okay? This is all about money, period, full stop. It's amazing. We talk about campaign contributions. I wasn't allowed to accept anything more than a glass of ice water as an agent, not a cup of coffee, not a can of soda. And the politicians are getting how much money, and you don't think that it influences them? I want you to realize that campaign contributions are bribes, plain and simple.
Yes.
And this is an employer-employer relationship. And that's why Washington was so concerned about the parties. Because how do you satisfy 2 masters if you're a politician? Your constituents have one concern, and your party leaders have a different concern. And if you don't do what your party leaders tell you to do, they will defund your campaign, which is how you get yourself fired. Okay? So basically, the employer of the government, no longer we the people, but the special interest groups who are pumping billions, literally billions of dollars into the campaign coffers. We're doing a lot of dangerous things, and it's not just the Mexican border. And with time limited, I just want to move on very quick, but make this one point. So what Bush did, they were never supposed to divide immigration enforcement between Customs and Border Protection and ICE. It was just supposed to be immigration enforcement. And in fact, when I testified before Congress, before the Immigration Reform Caucus, about 5 or 6 weeks after 9/11, I was removed the next day, by the way, as an agent, ostensibly because I had injured my leg executing warrants at the New York City Police Department and the FBI. But the timing was amazing. The package went out an hour after the hearing concluded. But at the hearing, I said we need to see immigration enforcement as a tripod. The inspectors enforce the laws at ports of entry, the Border Patrol between ports of entry. But the most critical element is the one that gets the least attention and least funding, and that's interior enforcement. Okay. In fact, at a hearing, Doris Meisner said interior enforcement was a term of usage devoid of meaning and invented by the investigators. Right. We're making this up. Understand that any alien determined to enter the United States will ultimately do so. Aliens come in through international airports. They come in through the seaport. They come in without inspection along our 95,000 miles of coastline. Of course, there's the infamous Mexican border, and then there's the Canadian border, and then there's unofficial landing strips scattered around the country. So if you are determined to get into the country, you will succeed. The issue is, what do we do after that happens? And it's remarkable that the Republicans are all saying, we've got to secure the border. We've got to secure the border. We can't even begin to talk about comprehensive reform until we secure the border. What border? You know, at one of my hearings, I said that the immigration system is like a balloon. If you squeeze at one end, it's going to bulge someplace else. Drugs did not used to flow through Mexico the way they do now. During the Reagan administration, most of the drugs came in through Miami on speedboats from Colombia. Think of the TV series Miami Vice. What happened? Reagan assigned Bush, his vice president, to take care of what was happening in Florida. Bush dispatched the Coast Guard and the Navy to block the boats. And they were seizing boats hand over fist. They were seizing the drugs. And our prosecutors were working with the Colombian government to lock up the cartel leaders. So the cartel leaders said, hey, wait a minute. They're seizing our drugs. They're coming into our country and arresting us and prosecuting us. Let's stop using boats. We'll go through Mexico. And then the Mexicans will get half of our profits, but they will act as a buffer, so it'll be more difficult for them to make criminal cases against us. That's when Mexico became the focus of the drug trade, okay? So if we block off the Mexican border, they'll find other ways of getting here. So the key issue is, what do we do within the interior? Look at what sanctuary cities are doing. We know now that airplanes are not being used to carry out attacks with motor vehicles are. The attack at the CIA in '93 involved an alien who bought into a courier van service. And on that morning in January '93, instead of jumping out with packages, he jumped out with an AK-47. He had a permit that allowed him to pull into the parking lot so he could deliver packages to the CIA. The World Trade Center bombing involved aliens who violated our immigration laws. The driver of the truck that was loaded with the bomb was an illegal alien. The alien who rented the truck was here illegally. They violated their status. Now we're giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens, but we're putting up barricades against car bombs and truck bombs. Brilliant, okay? You're looking at the Mexican border, and what Biden is saying is, well, we're processing these people. If Congress was serious, they'd ask, what kind of process are you using? How well are you vetting these people? I promise you they're not.
They're not. I mean, how do you vet people over? They don't even have a birth certificate. They don't have identity. Like, they can tell you my name is whatever.
That's what undocumented means.
Exactly.
And so on this. It only took 19 hijackers to carry out 9/11, which altered the whole world, not just the United States. Mm-hmm. Now we're losing 100,000 people, not to drug overdoses, to drug poisoning, because lots of the fentanyl is being shoved into other drugs so people don't know what they're taking. So when they say it's an overdose, no, it's poisoning. Over 100,000. By the way, if you want to talk about gun violence, why aren't we seeing toxicology reports on the shooters? You know, if a drunk driver plows into a school bus and kills a bunch of children, the first thing you hear about is how he had a 2.0 or whatever blood alcohol. I'd like to know what the drugs, what the pharmaceutical findings are through toxicology anytime there's a shooting. Because you have a lot of violent crime being perpetrated by gangs, which are funded by the drugs. You have Hezbollah operating throughout Latin America, by the way, working with the human smugglers and the drug smugglers, often one and the same, to flood drugs into America, to fund Iranian terrorism around the world, and to move sleeper agents into the United States. This hearing was held in 2018. I believe it was April 2018. Peter King was the chairman of the committee in the House at the time. Why is nobody talking about that? Why is no one talking about the need for interior enforcement? Immigration fraud is the responsibility of agents. I know, immigration agents. I did that. I did all these jobs. They go after the employers who hire people and shouldn't be. They go after the crooked lawyers. They go after the gangs. They have people in the Joint Terrorism Task Force or the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. I was assigned to that Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force for 10 years, the final 10 years of my career. The key is interior enforcement. You know, a long time ago, I said something, and it became my most plagiarized quote. I said nobody would break into the amusement park if they couldn't get to go on the rides. So you have Biden now saying, we're going to use deferred action, illegally, I might add, so that any illegal alien who says that his employer abused him can stay in the United States and work and get all kinds of benefits while they investigate the nasty employer who hired him. Now, look, I don't like the idea of people abusing those people. I was happy that under the Reagan amnesty, the other part of it was we're going to be able to finally punish employers who hire illegal aliens, which was great. But they didn't hire any agents to get the job done. That's one of the little tricks in Washington, the magic show. They pass laws, and then they make sure not to fund the enforcement of the laws. So they can go out there and say, we just passed a new law, and everybody says, yay. Okay? And in reality, you got 8 agents for the whole country enforcing laws where we need thousands of agents. You have 6,000 ICE agents. And because of the way Bush put DHS together, I came to call it the Department of Homeland Surrender. They not only split enforcement in half between Customs and Border Protection and ICE, but they folded in agencies that had nothing to do with immigration. So that became a major distraction. Customs has nothing to do with immigration. Prior to DHS, it was under Treasury. It was mostly about collecting duties and tariffs, okay, and contraband and money laundering. Now, all of that is what ICE does, plus intellectual property theft, plus kiddie porn, plus anything else they can give them to keep them away from their primary mission, which should be the enforcement of the immigration laws. At the border, immigration has nothing to do with customs or agriculture. Guess what? They are all folded in. So this was a way of making damn sure that immigration enforcement went down the tubes. In fact, John Hostetler said that what Bush gave us, George W., was immigration incoherence after 9/11, making it impossible to secure the borders, enforce the laws or protect the American people. And so now you look at what Biden is doing and you realize what the game is. And people are saying, we don't know why he's doing it. Well, let me tell you what, if you look at the budget that just got passed, $4 billion to take care of the crisis on the border. Not secure the border, not protect the border, but to pay for room, board, medical care, lawyers, you name it, for the illegal aliens.
But you see, that's where I say we don't have a border crisis right now. The budget wasn't approved. They might put it on their border crisis title, but no, this budget is basically to feed all the illegal aliens that have imported into the country.
Well, wait a moment.
It's better.
It's worse than that. It's worse than that, Annie. That's what I'm getting to. Because who's getting the money that was appropriated? It's these NGOs, okay? There was just a report, and it was part of one of my articles for Front Page Magazine. I'm very proud that I've been working with Front Page since 2014. There was an organization, an NGO, that got a no competitive bid contract for something, it was over $100 million. And they were actually paid $17 million for beds that were never used to care for what are called migrants. Migrant is a wrong word. You can have migrants that don't cross international borders. There are migrant farm workers in America who are U.S. citizens. They travel from farm to farm. We call them migrants, okay? Again, we're going to take away the notion of borders. So I have an idea. Instead of calling them, if they don't want to call them aliens and they don't want to call them whatever else they should be called, why don't we call them what they are? Clients. These are clients for immigration law firms, and they are clients to the NGOs. Now, ask yourself, why did that NGO get a no competitive bid contract when they'd never done any work for DHS before? This is unbelievable. Turns out that Biden had an official, part of the transition team at DHS, who quit the government, went to work for that NGO, according to an inspector general report and according to something that Judicial Watch wrote, and that was my basis for my article. This guy went to work for that NGO, and within a matter of a couple of months, they got this contract for well over $100 million. Think of how many more contracts will go to how many more NGOs so that the money goes round and round. These NGOs undoubtedly fund political campaigns, and the political campaigns reward them with contracts. So this is a massive money laundering operation to the tune of billions of dollars. And when you have politicians saying, we don't take PAC money, Political Action Committee money, they don't have to. The parties get the money, and they disperse it to the politicians who do as they're told. You don't do as you're told, you don't get the money, and you lose your election. So the reason, the motivation for part of what we're witnessing, besides destroying America, because I wrote another article for Front Page, and I said that for the Democrats to succeed, Americans must fail. My dad said to me, he said, Mike, if you want to turn a capitalist into a communist, take away his money. When you destroy the middle class, you force people to take government subsidies. When I was a kid and got an allowance, my mother could tell me what I could and could not spend my allowance on, right? No comic books this week, Mike, right? I was 8 years old. When I had my own job, I could have bought all the comic books I wanted because that was the money that I earned. The Democrats are the quintessential control freaks. They want to be large and in charge. And the Republicans are motivated by unbridled greed. I was on a conservative program, and he said to me, under capitalism, there's a guarantee of opportunity, not a guarantee of outcome. And I said he was dead wrong. We got into a heated argument on air on his program. And I said, I could prove you wrong with just 2 words. He said, what 2 words? And I said, golden parachute. You have executives and companies who drive their companies into the ground. You saw it with Boeing after their 737 MAX crashed. You saw it with Jeffrey Immelt at General Electric. They drive the companies into the ground, and they walk out the door with a check for millions upon millions of dollars, while their hapless employees who work their tails off are escorted out of the building by an armed security guard who makes certain they don't even take a pen or a stapler with the company logo on it. So when we hear this nonsense about a guarantee of opportunity, the opportunities are drying up as you flood America with more and more foreign workers. The consequence? American technology is winding up in China. We've trained Chinese engineers and programmers in the United States. Betsy DeVos, under Trump, she was the Secretary of Education, identified $6 billion in money that went from Saudi Arabia, China, and other countries, not our allies, Why? So that they could put their professors in the universities, their students in our universities. They could determine the curriculum, and they use those universities as recruiting places for their own citizens and other people so they could commit espionage against America. And now China is building up its nuclear navy, building up its fighter planes, all the technology that has gone from the United States to China. And by the way, we give these engineering students, these science students, something called optional practical training, so they get jobs, guess where? Working for U.S. military contractors, which makes the espionage all the easier. And in fact, the intelligence community has warned that this espionage is so pervasive, they've given it the sarcastic nickname of Chinese takeout. All possible because of multiple failures of the immigration system. So when people say, oh, it's only immigration, we're going to get to the root cause. Yes, there are people coming here to work, which hurts American workers, and then they send money out of the country, which hurts our economy. You also have fugitives from justice. You also have gangbangers. You have drug traffickers. You have terrorists. So when you talk about root cause, there's lots of root causes, but the biggest one, our government is enticing people to come here. And when you have Republicans saying, well, once we secure the border, guess what? That fires the starter's pistol for aspiring illegal aliens from all over the world, because now they say to themselves, you know what? If I can get to America, sooner or later, these idiots are going to give me a green card, and then I can bring my family here. And when Biden said that, let's have an amnesty, right? I said, instead of calling it the Terrorist Assistance and Facilitation Act, which I called it during the 2005-2006 era in an article I wrote for Washington Times that Jeff Sessions quoted from the floor of the Senate during the floor debate, I now call it the Overwhelm America Act. It is estimated, or was in 2018 by MIT and a few other universities, that back then there were 22 or 23 million illegals in the country. God only knows. I'm sure we're over 30 million with what Biden has done. But guess what? If we legalize 30 million, you know how many aliens will get green cards? And people say to me, well, Mike, 30 million. No. What no one talks about is they will have an immediate absolute right to bring in all their minor children. So if on average they each bring in 4 kids, you could be looking at well over 100 million children coming to America overnight, literally, right? They immediately have to be enrolled in our schools. And if you want to talk about sustainability, the favorite buzzword of the radical lunatics on the left, think of this. There's a drought in Colorado and in the West, serious drought. Rivers are down to the riverbeds, okay? Every person in the country, I don't care what your status is from an immigration perspective, the environment could care less. Every person on average needs 100 gallons of water. If Joe Biden is responsible for 5 million aliens entering the country, which is a number I've been seeing bandied about lately, that means each and every day, 7 days a week, 500 million gallons of water are being consumed by people who shouldn't be here. Think of the impact on the environment, the power grid, education, transportation, the school system. The Congressional Budget Office back in 2006 estimated that it costs 20 to 40% more to educate kids who can't speak, read, or write English. Guess what? If we bring in 100 million kids, who's going to pay for the education? What will it do to the educational system that's already crumbling because of the insanity that's going on with the indoctrination of our children?
Yes.
If this isn't a concerted effort to destroy us, I don't know what is. And that brings us back to China and Biden's son's laptop and all these other politicians who have been intimate with China. In the case of Swalwell, talk about being intimate, okay?
Yes,
I believe.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Michael. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Michael, but we are out of time on this specific airtime. But what you just said, I think that's a great cliffhanger for bringing you back so we can pick up the discussion on how this all takes us back to China and Hunter, laptop, all of that. But before we go, tell my audience where they go to, if they have any questions they want to email you, if they want to read your articles, if they want to follow your work, where is it they go?
Okay, my website is michaelcutler.net. I also do my internet radio program, the Michael Cutler Hour, on Friday nights on Blog Talk Radio, 7 p.m. And of course, I'm very proud of my relationship with Front Page Magazine, sponsored by the David Horowitz Freedom Center. Just go to frontpagemag.com. But get involved, folks. You know, the one question we should be asking all politicians, How are these policies in the best interests of the average American? That's the question I've yet to hear asked at the White House. What do you think of that question?
I think every single American should ask that question and also demand an answer to that question,
You
because
bet.
sometimes you can
Absolutely.
just ask it and they may not answer, but demand an answer because they work for all of
Absolutely.
us and they should have
Yes.
an answer. Michael Cutler, thank you. I look forward to having you back. Let's not leave too much of a gap. Try for end of
Yep.
this week, early next week. I will call you off air. But for today, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're very busy. Thanks for all the information. And please stay safe and keep up the good work because we need you.
Thank you. You too. Remember, folks, you judge a person's intelligence by the questions they ask. Let's ask these politicians the right questions and demand the answers. That's our right as Americans.
Amen. Guys, I'm going to take a 1 minute sponsor break and be back with you to wrap up today's live feed. So don't go anywhere. Well, hello, everybody. It's Annie Cyrus. Welcome to my art studio where all the magic happens. This is the station for painting, and that is the station for all the resin art I do. If you want to check out my art, all you gotta do is go to lutfstudio.com. But I'm sure, or at least I hope, I'll see you at L. Alrighty, awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for sticking around. I hope I saw a couple of comments that were hurting feelings. That's all right. That's what I'm here for. But I hope rest of you who were here either learned something from this, I would say, historical interview, because he did give us a lot of pointers in history of at least immigration situation in America. I hope you enjoyed it. I do want to address two comments. One of them from Go Away on Frank's speech. I think you were able to find my YouTube account, but if you haven't, so here are the platforms that I do stream on. Facebook is just under my full name, Inaz Annie Cyrus. You do not need to follow me or friend me. It's a public stream. You can find me on YouTube under ACU News. ACU stands for Annie Cyrus Unfiltered. ACU News, that's my YouTube channel. On Twitter, if you're watching, by the way, I noticed we had plenty for first stream ever on Tweet. Thank you for guys for tuning in. It's Live Up to Freedom is my handle or Twitter handle. Thank you guys. Thank you. I appreciate your comments. There's one more comment that I want to address from Facebook because I feel like I need to inform this person. Dan, if you're still with me here, you said, how are we supposed to put a stock in anything you say when you're a Trumpster? Darling, I am not a Trumpster. I have never been a Trumpster. I am one of very, very handful American investigative journalists who have called out President Trump since about 7 months ago on missteps and mistakes. And I have even called on him to retract some of the things he has mentioned or endorsements he has made. So I don't know where you've been, but darling, I am not a Trumpster. I am a proud American, and I don't care who does the wrong deed. I will be here to say they did it. Okay, guys, I'll see you tomorrow at the same time on all platforms again at 2:30 Central Time. And you can see the rerun of this day, a show on WVW-TV or WordWeekend.com at 5 p.m. Central Time. If you missed the show, you can go there and watch it live again. Please stay safe, stay vigilant. Remember, I need your support. So lutfstudio.com, lutfstudio.com, promo code Frank. This is my very latest creation, actually. I'm very proud of it. This clock looks so amazingly gorgeous, and it is available. So if you like to purchase this or any other items that are available on my store, all you got to do is go to lutfstudio.com, use the promo code Frank, also mystore.com or mypillow.com. Use the promo code AC21, AC21 on the screen, and you get discounts. I get credit so I can continue doing this. I am working on doing 2 live stream a day, so hopefully we get there and bring on more experts, more guests, and I get more chance to talk to you. Thanks again. Stay safe, stay vigilant. May God bless you, and may God bless America. I'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.